This is a true account, drawn from court records and public reporting. Some names, dates, and details are disturbing. On December 2, 1979, a fire alarm sounded at the Travel Inn Motor Hotel near Times Square in New York City. Firefighters responded to the blaze and forced their way into a burning room. Inside, they did not find an ordinary accident. They found the remains of 2 women, and they realized quickly that the fire had been set deliberately, an attempt to destroy what had happened there. One of the 2 women was later identified as 22-year-old Diane Cusick. The second woman has never been identified. To this day, she remains a Jane Doe, a life reduced to an open case file. That absence of identity is one of the enduring wounds of this case. A person who mattered to someone, somewhere, still unnamed decades later. Investigators recognized that this was not an isolated act. The staging, the fire, the methodical brutality pointed to someone who had done this before and would do it again. Across Bergen County, New Jersey, and New York City, detectives were confronting a series of killings that shared unsettling similarities. The press would come to call the man responsible the torso killer, a name drawn from the condition in which some victims were left. The pattern stretched back years, though investigators would only understand its full scope much later. In Nassau County, New York, women had been strangled across the early 1970s. Diane Cusick, 23, was killed on February 15, 1968. Mary Beth Hines died on May 10, 1972. Laverne Moy died on July 20, 1972. Sheila Hyman died on July 20, 1973. Marita Emerita Rosado Nieves died on December 27, 1973. In New Jersey, 17-year-old Mary Ann Pryor and 16-year-old Lorraine Marie Kelly were murdered on August 9, 1974. 2 teenagers whose deaths would go unsolved for decades. Each of these women had a family, a name, a future taken from them. But in December 1979, none of that full picture was visible. What detectives had was a burning hotel room, 2 victims, and the knowledge that whoever did this was still out there. The break did not come from forensics or a tip. It came from a survivor. On May 22, 1980, at the Quality Inn in Hasbrook Heights, New Jersey, a man was attempting to murder 18-year-old Leslie Ann Odell. Her screams brought help. He was arrested at the scene. That man was Richard Francis Cottingham, born November 25, 1946. His arrest cracked open a series of investigations that had frustrated detectives across 2 states. Cottingham had been living an outwardly conventional life. His wife had filed for divorce in April 1978. She withdrew the petition upon his arrest, and then completed the divorce after his 1981 conviction. Behind that ordinary exterior was a man who would be tied to a string of murders spanning more than a decade. The legal reckoning came in a sequence of trials. On June 11, 1981, Cottingham was convicted of the murder of 19-year-old Valerie Street, whose body had been found at the Quality Inn, and of assault. On October 12, 1982, he was convicted of the murder of Mary Ann Carr. Then, on July 9, 1984, a jury convicted him of the murders of Diane Cusick, the unidentified Jane Doe, and Jean Rayner, the New York City killings, including the 2 women found in that burning Times Square hotel room. The convictions accumulated. He was sentenced to a minimum of 192 years, plus life. For years, that seemed to be the end of the story, but it was not. Decades later, Cottingham began to admit to killings that had remained unsolved, cases that had haunted families for a generation. On April 27, 2021, he pleaded guilty to the 1974 murders of Mary Ann Pryor and Lorraine Marie Kelly, the two teenage girls killed on August 9, 1974. Then, on December 5, 2022, he pleaded guilty to the February 15, 1968 murder of Diane Cusick, who was 23 years old. In connection with that resolution, he admitted to strangling 4 other women in the 1970s. Mary Beth Hines, Laverne Moy, Sheila Hyman, and Marita Emerita Rosado Nieves. The Nassau County District Attorney confirmed that Cottingham was tried and convicted for 3 murders in New York State, and was additionally convicted of multiple murders and other crimes in New Jersey. For the Cusick murder, he was sentenced to 25 years to life. The confessions did not stop. On January 7, 2026, Cottingham confessed to the murder of 18-year-old nursing student Alice Eberhardt, killed on September 24, 1965, in Fair Lawn, New Jersey, pushing the known timeline of his crimes back even further, to a case more than half a century old. Richard Cottingham is currently incarcerated at Southwood State Prison in Bridgeton, New Jersey, serving 3 life sentences. His convictions stand. He was tried, he was found guilty, and in his later years he confirmed through guilty pleas what investigators had long suspected, that the pattern detectives first glimpsed in the wreckage of a burning hotel room stretched across states and decades. What lingers about this case is not only its scale, but its unfinished edges. One of the 2 women found in that Times Square room in December 1979 has never been identified. She has no name in the record, only the designation Jane Doe. Advances in forensic technology and cold case investigation have brought resolution to families who waited decades. The guilty pleas of 2021, 2022, and the confession of 2026 are proof that old cases can still yield answers. But identification is a different task, and it requires the public. If someone recognizes a detail, if a family somewhere has spent decades not knowing what happened to a daughter or sister who vanished near New York in the late 1970s, that memory could still restore a name. The case reminds us that behind every count in a conviction is a person, and that the work of honoring them is not finished until each one is known. Anyone with information about unidentified victims connected to these investigations is urged to contact law enforcement.